Picture this. You're texting back and forth with a girl you like. The conversation's going fine. You're both responding. Everything seems normal, but something's off. There's no spark, no electricity. It feels like you're interviewing her for a job she doesn't even want, and deep down, you know exactly what's happening. You're one boring text away from becoming that guy she leaves unread. I've been there, staring at my phone at 11 p.m., reading the same dry exchange over and over, wondering where I went wrong. And here's what nobody tells you. The conversation didn't die because you said something wrong. It died because you never made her feel anything in the first place. I spent months breaking down successful text conversations, the ones that led somewhere versus the ones that fizzled into nothing. I analyzed what actually creates attraction through a screen versus what just fills space, and what I found changed everything about how I text. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to turn any flat, going nowhere text conversation into something she can't stop thinking about. And if you want more content like this that actually works in real life, hit that like button so I know to keep making these. But here's the thing, most guys miss completely. They think texting is about exchanging information, about being nice, about keeping the conversation alive. But watch what happens when you operate from that mindset. She asks what you're up to. You tell her. She says, cool. You ask her the same question back. She gives you a one-word answer. You try to build off it. She responds with an emoji. The conversation limps along like a wounded animal until one of you finally lets it die. You feel that? That slow suffocation? That's what happens when you're playing it safe, when you're so afraid of saying the wrong thing that you never say anything interesting at all. But here's where it gets tricky, because the instinct, the thing your brain screams at you to do, is to try harder. Send longer texts, ask more questions, show more interest, prove you're a good guy who really cares about getting to know her, and that instinct, it's destroying your chances. I learned this the hard way with a girl called Sarah. We matched on an app. First few exchanges were solid, but then I made the classic mistake. I started treating the conversation like a job interview where I had to prove I deserved the position. What do you do for fun? Where did you grow up? What kind of music do you like? Every text was another boring question. Every response from her got shorter. By day 3, she was giving me nothing, and I remember sitting there, frustrated, thinking she just wasn't that into me, but that wasn't it. The problem wasn't her interest level. The problem was I'd turned myself into homework, into a chore, into the human equivalent of oatmeal filling, maybe, but completely forgettable. So what actually works? What creates that electric feeling that makes a girl lean into her phone instead of away from it? It's this. Think about the last text conversation you had that actually went somewhere. The ones where she was sending multiple messages before you could even respond. Where she was throwing in extra emojis and exclamation points and clearly invested in keeping things going. What was different about those exchanges? Well, it wasn't because you perfectly interviewed her. It wasn't because you were extra respectful or extra nice. It was because something in those messages made her feel something, made her curious, made her want to chase the conversation instead of letting it die. And here's what blew my mind when I finally figured this out. Creating that feeling isn't complicated. It doesn't require you to be funnier or more charming than you actually are. It just requires you to stop doing the things that kill attraction and start doing the things that build it. But before I show you exactly how, you need to understand why most advice about texting is actively making things worse, because the dating advice industry has sold you a lie. They tell you to be yourself and just be genuine and show interest by asking thoughtful questions. And on paper, that sounds reasonable. But watch what happens in practice. You ask a thoughtful question. She gives you a surface level answer. You validate that answer immediately. Oh, that's so cool. I love that too. Because you think you're building connection. But here's what actually just happened. You gave away your approval for free. You told her that she doesn't have to do anything to earn your interest, that you're already sold. And the second she knows that, the game is over. There's this concept in psychology called intermittent reinforcement that explains everything about why some conversations hook people and others don't. Researchers found that when rewards are unpredictable, when you don't know if you'll get validation or have to work for it, the brain becomes obsessed. It craves resolution. It stays engaged. But when rewards are constant and guaranteed, the brain checks out. There's nothing left to chase. So every time you validate her immediately, every time you laugh at something that isn't funny. Every time you agree with everything she says just to keep things smooth, you're training her brain to stop caring. You're removing all the tension that makes texting interesting in the first place. I watched a friend do this in real time once we were at a bar, and he was texting this girl he'd been seeing. She sent something like, "I'm so bad at cooking LOL." And immediately, without even thinking, he replied, "Haha, no, I'm sure you're great at it." Trying to be nice, trying to make her feel good. But I looked at him and said, "You just killed it." He got defensive, said he was being supportive, but 3 texts later, she stopped responding because he'd shown her she didn't have to be interesting or earn anything. His approval was automatic. Therefore, the first shift you need to make, and this is the foundation everything else builds on, is to stop giving validation like it's candy on Halloween. Start making her work for it. Not because you're trying to be mean or play games, but because tension is what creates attraction. Uncertainty is what keeps people engaged. But here's where guys mess this up in a different direction. They swing too far the other way. They think making her work for it means being cold or playing hard to get or taking hours to respond. And that's not it either. That's just creating distance, which is not the same as creating tension. Real tension, the kind that makes text conversations flirty, comes from walking a specific tightrope. You need to show interest, but in a way that makes her unsure if she has you yet. You need to be engaging, but in a way that keeps her guessing about what you'll say next. You need to be fun, but in a way that doesn't hand her all your cards at once. So let me show you exactly how this works in practice. Let's say she texts you something neutral, something like, "Just got off work, so tired." Most guys will respond with sympathy, "Oh, I'm sorry, that sucks. Long day," and there's nothing wrong with that response except that it's completely forgettable. It doesn't create any emotion. It doesn't push the conversation anywhere interesting. But what if instead you said something like, "Tired? You look like the type who's secretly been napping in the break room." Watch what just happened. You didn't validate her complaint. You playfully challenged her instead. You created a little spark of, wait, what does he mean by that? In her brain, she has to respond now. She has to defend herself or play along. You just gave her something to chase. Or she says something like, "I'm terrible at cooking." And instead of reassuring her like every other guy would, you say, "Oh no, so you're the girl who burns water. I should have seen the signs." You're teasing her, but it's light, it's playful. It's not mean, it's flirty. And most importantly, it's unpredictable. She doesn't know if you're serious or joking or somewhere in between, so her brain stays locked in. This is what I mean by tension. You're not being a jerk. You're not ignoring her or making her feel bad. You're just refusing to be boring. You're refusing to give her the same predictable responses every other guy gives. And that refusal, that willingness to be a little unpredictable, is what transforms a dead conversation into something electric. Now, I want to pause here because this is exactly where most guys start second guessing themselves. They read her signals wrong. They wonder if she's genuinely interested or just being polite. They can't tell if they're building attraction or wasting their time. And honestly, that confusion is normal. Reading between the lines isn't always obvious. That's actually why I wrote my book, The Truth Detector. It breaks down exactly how to know what she really wants, if she's using you, and when she's playing games. Because the reality is, you can have perfect texting skills, but if you can't read her true intentions, you're still operating blind. And nobody wants to invest energy in someone who's not actually interested. But here's the trap. You can't just tease randomly and expect it to work. There's a specific rhythm to this, a specific balance between challenging her and showing interest. And if you get that balance wrong, everything falls apart. So let me tell you what happened after I figured this out with Sarah, the girl I mentioned earlier who went cold on me. I didn't panic. I didn't double text with more interview questions. I waited 2 days, then sent something completely different. She'd mentioned in her profile she was into yoga, so I texted, "Be honest, when you say you're into yoga, do you mean actual yoga or just posting pictures in yoga pants? Risky? Maybe. But watch what it did. It challenged her. It was playful, but had a little edge. It made her prove something, and she responded within 5 minutes, not with a short answer, with a paragraph defending herself and throwing it back at me. The conversation went from life support to fully alive in one text because I stopped trying to be safe and started creating something worth responding to. But here's what most guys don't understand about teasing. It only works if she knows, on some level, that you're interested. If you're just cold and challenging with no warmth underneath, you're not flirty, you're just annoying. Think of it like this. Teasing is the spark, but interest is the kindling. You need both for a fire. But how do you show interest without killing the tension? How do you let her know you care without giving away all your power? This is where the second shift comes in. And it's subtle, but it changes everything. You need to learn to calibrate, to read the temperature of the conversation and adjust in real time. When she's chasing, when she's sending long texts or double texting or clearly invested, you can lean back a little, be more challenging, make her work. But when she's pulling away or giving short responses, you need to throw in just enough genuine interest to keep her engaged, not validation, not approval, just a hint that there's something real underneath the playfulness. I watched a guy named Mark do this perfectly. Once he was texting this girl who'd gone quiet on him. Most guys would have panicked and started asking questions or apologizing for something they didn't even do. But Mark sent, "You went silent on me. Either I said something wrong or you got abducted by aliens," really hoping it's the aliens. Light, self-aware, but also showing he noticed and cared enough to say something. She laughed and re-engaged immediately. That's calibration. He didn't pretend he didn't notice. He didn't play it cold, but he also didn't get needy or weird about it. He acknowledged reality in a way that was playful and confident, and that combination, awareness plus confidence, is magnetic. Therefore, the second thing you need to master is this. Match her investment level, but stay slightly less available than she is. If she's sending you 3 texts, you send 2. If she's texting back immediately, you take a few minutes, not hours, just enough to keep the balance tilted slightly in your direction, because the person who cares less has the power, and power, whether we like it or not, is attractive. But here's where it gets interesting, because there's a third element that separates boring conversations from the ones she screenshots and shows her friends, and this one is about the actual content of what you're saying, because you can have perfect timing and perfect calibration, but if your messages are still flat and predictable, none of it matters. Think about the texts you remember, the ones that stuck with you. They weren't the ones where someone asked how your day was. They were the ones that made you feel something unexpected, the ones that created a little movie in your head, the ones that hinted at something more happening beneath the surface. So here's what you do. You stop talking about facts and start creating experiences. Stop asking questions like, "What are you doing this weekend?" and start painting pictures. Say something like, "I'm calling it now." You're definitely the type who says she'll have a chill weekend and ends up at 3 different places by Sunday night. You're not asking, you're assuming. You're creating a scenario she has to step into and respond to. Or instead of, "How was your day?" you say, "Scale of 1 to 10, how much did you want to fake your own death at work today?" You're asking about her day, but in a way that's actually interesting, in a way that gives her room to be funny or dramatic or honest. You're handing her a stage instead of a boring question. This is what I mean by creating experiences through text. You're not just exchanging information anymore. You're building little moments, little sparks, little reasons for her to stay engaged and see where this goes. I had this realization watching my friend Alex text this girl he just met. Every message he sent created some kind of visual or emotion. She mentioned she was at the gym. Instead of, "Nice, what's your workout?" he said, "Let me guess, 30 minutes of actual working out, 20 minutes picking the perfect playlist, 10 minutes pretending to stretch while scrolling Instagram." Was he right? Didn't matter. She laughed and responded with a detailed breakdown of her actual gym routine. He'd created something specific and visual, something she wanted to engage with. So the third shift is this. Stop being a reporter and start being a screenwriter. Every text should create some kind of scene or emotion or moment in her head. Make her visualize something. Make her feel something. Make her want to step into the world you're creating instead of just reading words on a screen. But let me show you how this all comes together. Because knowing these 3 shifts separately is one thing, but actually using them in real time. When you're staring at your phone trying to figure out what to say, that's that's where most guys freeze up. So let's walk through a real scenario. She texts you something boring, something like just watching Netflix LOL. This is where 90% of guys kill the conversation. They either ask what she's watching, which leads nowhere, or they say something generic like nice, enjoy, and let it die. Both options are playing it safe. Both options are forgettable, but you know better now. You understand tension. So instead you say, let me guess, you told yourself you'd watch one episode and now it's 3 hours later and you're having a full emotional breakdown over fictional characters. Watch what you just did. You created a specific scene. You gently teased her and you made an assumption she has to respond to. She either confirms it and laughs, or she pushes back and tells you what she's actually doing. Either way, she's engaged. She responds, okay, wow, are you watching me through my window or something? Perfect. She's playing along. She's matching your energy. So now you can push it further. I wish. But honestly, your curtain game is too strong. Respect. You threw in something slightly absurd, something that makes her laugh, but you also complimented her in a weird sideways way. You're keeping it light, but layering in little moments of connection. This is the rhythm. Challenge, then give a little warmth, tease, then show interest, create tension, then release it slightly, back and forth, like a dance where you're always leading but making it feel effortless. But here's what separates good texting from great texting. At some point in the conversation, you need to shift gears. You can't stay in playful teasing mode forever, because eventually that gets exhausting too. Eventually you need to show her there's depth underneath the fun, that you're not just performing. So after a few exchanges of banter, you drop something real, not heavy, not weird, just genuine. She mentioned something about her day being stressful, and instead of immediately jumping to a joke, you say, real talk though, what actually happened? Was it people or just life being life? You shifted. You gave her permission to be real for a second. And that shift, from playful to genuine, creates a whole different kind of connection. I saw this work perfectly with a girl I was texting last year. We've been going back and forth with jokes and teasing for like 20 minutes. It was fun, but surface level. Then she mentioned she'd had a rough week, and instead of glossing over it, I said, wait, actually rough or just normal life stuff? Because if it's actually rough, I'll stop being annoying for 5 seconds. She opened up, told me what was going on, and the conversation went from fun to real in a way that made everything after that matter more. But here's the thing, and this is where you really need to pay attention, because when a girl opens up like that, when she shifts from playful to vulnerable, you're getting a glimpse of what she actually wants from you. Is she looking for emotional support? Is she testing to see if you'll still be interested when things aren't light and fun? Or is she using this moment to keep you engaged while she figures out her real options? These are the moments that reveal everything. And honestly, this is the exact kind of situation I break down in The Truth Detector. How to read what's really happening beneath the surface, so you're never left wondering if you're being played or if this is actually going somewhere real, because the last thing you want is to invest in someone who's just keeping you around as an option. It's the first link in the description, because that's calibration at its best, knowing when to push and when to pull back, when to challenge and when to listen, when to be the fun guy and when to be the guy who actually sees her. Therefore, the third and final thing you need to understand is this: flirty doesn't mean surface level. The best text conversations have range. They move between playful and real, between challenging and supportive, between teasing and genuine interest. And that range, that willingness to shift modes, is what makes you unforgettable. But let's talk about what happens when you mess this up, because you will. Everyone does. You'll send a text that lands wrong. You'll push too hard or not hard enough. You'll misread the moment and say something that kills the vibe. And when that happens, most guys panic. They apologize. They over-explain. They try to fix it immediately. And that panic, that's what actually ruins things. But here's what you do instead. Acknowledge it and move on. If you sent something that fell flat, don't pretend it didn't happen. Don't ignore it and hope she forgets. Just own it lightly. Say something like, okay, that sounded better in my head, or, well, that joke died. RIP. You're showing you're aware. You're showing you're confident enough to admit when something didn't work, and then you just keep going. You don't dwell. You don't make it a thing. Confidence isn't never messing up. Confidence is messing up and not letting it break your stride. And women can feel that through a screen just as much as they can in person. But here's everything you need to remember. Stop validating immediately. Make her earn your interest by being playful and unpredictable. Match her investment, but stay slightly less available to keep the power tilted in your direction and create experiences with your words instead of just exchanging boring information. Challenge, warmth, and depth. That's the formula. You don't keep a conversation alive by being careful. You keep it alive by being bold enough to make her feel something. And yeah, that means some girls won't vibe with it. Some will think you're too much or too forward or too whatever. But the ones who do, they'll be texting you back at midnight because they can't stop thinking about where the conversation might go next. And look, I get it. Sometimes even with all these skills, you're still left wondering where you actually stand. Is she genuinely into you or just bored and killing time? Is this going somewhere or are you just convenient entertainment? Those questions matter because you don't want to waste months on someone who was never serious about you in the first place. That's why I put together the Truth Detector to give you the framework to answer those exact questions with confidence so you're never left guessing or playing detective with her mixed signals. You deserve to know where you stand. It's the first link in the description, so go check it out now. And if you have already, then click here to watch this video next. I'll see you there.